Ja, velkommen til alle, som har logget sig på. Jeg ser, at det tikker ind lidt indlogginger endnu, så vi venter bare nogle få sekunder endnu, så starter vi. Ja, velkommen til alle sammen. Mange som har logget sig på nu. Kjempe det. Lau Sørensen her, jobber i Data Center Solutions teamet i nLogic. Har med os Michelle Graumans i Nutanix. Michelle, are you with us?
Yes, hi everyone.
Good stuff. Hello Michelle. Til fordel for Michelle og også et par engelsktalende, så skal jeg lægge om fra den danske norsken min til en dansk engelsk. So yeah, Michelle, for your comfort, switch to English, and a couple of others also. So welcome everyone again. Thank you for taking the time to join our session this afternoon. We made a couple of sessions here. One actually ran already last week, where we were looking into file storage, how we can, with a software-defined system, do file storage, and also do replication across multiple sites. Now today, look a little bit further, how we can automate and do automation across clouds, automate a hyperconverged software-defined infrastructure. And it is a series, and we keep going. Next week, we will look at different take on things, which is the part where we look into how to get control of both cost and security across both the different cloud environments where we have infrastructure and also the local environment. I have another guy coming in and speaking to us about that. And really the reason we do this is we want to share with you guys what we found really has been working well. We did a couple of larger projects during the winter and found bits and pieces that we found were worth sharing and could make value for other people as well. So that's really the background. Many people competing for your time, many people, even your kids, compete during work hours. So really appreciate taking the time. We hope to make it a little bit comfortable and enjoyable. For that reason, we also came up with the concept, which is really in the name, Tech&Takeaway. I hope some of you, maybe all, but at least some of you actually did what we asked you to do. Order a pizza, and you have it in front of you, the headset on your head, and then send across the recipe, and we will reimburse your cost. So I hope you actually are enjoying that part. For today, the agenda, really look into how, as a start, how actually Nutanix was made for automation. What makes it different? How is the bits and pieces and the architecture really built differently to make it possible to automate it really well. And then, Michelle, I'm sorry I took your ClickOps word. I think it's...
No, I'm proud, actually. I'm honored.
I used that one on also LinkedIn, and we used it in the invitation, and it appears that ClickOps is a good word. So really, it's a matter of getting from ClickOps, right?
exactly. Yeah, that's where we come from, and going towards a more DevOps environment. Yeah, that's my life story actually. Yeah. So if we've come to that point, I'll take it from here.
Yeah, just a short minute.
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
we have the rest. Just to cover also the Q&A part. We agreed to let you guys ask questions in two ways. There's the Q&A box, and please use that when Michelle is presenting. I do know that you have, was it six screens, Michelle, that you're monitoring? Yeah,
Yes.
There's room for a Q&A box also.
I'm not sure where they will pop up, but is it just a chat window of Zoom?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Zoom minimizes the bar, but I should be able to open it up. I have enough screens to work with, indeed. Yeah.
Exactly, we'll help you along the way. So when Michelle's doing his stuff, use the Q&A, and then he'll make a stop every now and then and open up for online audio questions, right?
Yeah.
So I actually just took a picture of you for everyone to be able to for your comfort. So yeah, do your own presentation, and then I think in the meantime we will switch to your screen, Michelle.
Thank you. All right. Yeah. It's actually called Q&A. I can see it now. Yeah, yeah.
We see your screen.
All right. Perfect. I have the Q&A question screen open, so I should be able to see questions arrive. Yeah, like you said, thank you for that introduction. I'm 39 years old. I've been in IT since 1999. I was literally hired in what I call the wave of ClickOps people joining IT. Here's a car. Here's a lease car. Here's some Microsoft favors. Come do some ClickOps work. That's literally how I joined IT. And yeah, I've been doing infrastructure automation in the last 10 years, pretty much, and infrastructure delivery projects in the whole set of my career, basically since 1999. And with the coming of cloud, I've seen a shift come, and actually a shift that happened while I was doing something else. I wasn't really paying attention, and when I look back, I said, like, cloud has done something to us. It was doing something to infrastructure, what I've been doing a few years before that, and so that changed into a cloud native world, a DevOps world. So I grew into a DevOps role without actually knowing it. Because I was doing infrastructure automation and those kind of things. So what cloud did was really automating the entire infrastructure delivery, huge parts of infrastructure management, and making that available through public APIs, right? And that last part, the fact that the entire stack is running in a universal programming language, REST API, is very important to me. There's a lot of other things. I honestly despise putting my personal data in a public cloud, although I am already doing it with iPhone, right, without knowing it. I think it's generally a bad idea to put all our stuff into one big superpower, but still they're doing something very good. So what is it they're doing so good? And in my honest and humble opinion, that is coming from the fact that the entire stack they have to work with, or they provide to their public, is using the same universal language as developers are using in a new SaaS-like world. So it's a whole world evolving around a SaaS-like delivery. Not only the applications are talking one universal language, but in small components like microservices, but also the infrastructure is talking that same language, right? So that allows a tremendous increase of developer velocity. Causing developers to do iterations of test cycles 20, 40, 60 times a day. While if in that process chain, there is a person that needs to execute a change request, like restoring a database for dev test, or just resetting it back to the previous snapshot, right? If there's a manual process in that chain, that process decreases velocity By how many? I mean, that depends on humans. And because the full infrastructure stack is talking the same universal language, and those developers have the access to talk to the infrastructure as if it's just another microservices app, the developers or the DevOps people are able to control the infrastructure without the need of a legacy IT infrastructure ClickOps team, basically, right? There's still boundaries, but the essence of it is that cloud has brought this enormous revolution in how we work. Looking back at my career, at some point, I couldn't go back to being a ClickOps because I saw that world changing. Right, the world of ClickOps is shrinking. I was an Exchange admin 10 years ago, right? I don't want to find jobs being an Exchange admin right now, because that's going to be a tough one to find. Maybe they still exist. Of course, they still exist, but they're not that many anymore as they were in 2002 or 2003, whatever it was. I was driving around with Exchange servers in the back of my car. Fixing open relay problems. That will change. The whole way of how we manage standard infrastructure has changed. The infrastructure has become commodity, and developers have gotten or received a much more important role in how users consume IT. Developers have a much more leading role than IT infrastructure people used to have, right? I mean, back in 2000 years, we were in charge as infrastructure teams. We would be able to tell the user, hey, you're gonna get your new server in 2 weeks from now. If you tell your customer they're gonna get their new server in 2 weeks from now, they're gonna look at you and say, what? And what are you doing? And so the developer is much more in charge of how fast and how things are being delivered. And if a management team of a DevOps team, of a developer team, can increase velocity of delivering applications in a public cloud much more faster than he would on-prem, then why would he not go to public cloud if his velocity, etc., his income is generated much faster that way? Accepting the risk of putting all bad things and lock-ins, really also lock-ins in a public cloud provider. I don't want to talk too much bad about public clouds, but this is really how I think. Going back a little bit to, the reason why, and I actually skipped this one, I should have showed you. The reason why this is working is because in modern SaaS application worlds and development life cycles, applications are made smaller, microservices based, containerized applications that are very small, and they all talk one universal language, which is REST API. So these developers are already very agile in developing their own code because they don't need to be aware of each other's code. They are simply aware of the universal language in between, and therefore they can talk to each other on the same universal language. And that's how the software works. But now infrastructure or cloud technology, as you would say it, or even better, cloud native infrastructure, you can call it, is actually providing one more gap in that technology, and that's happening in public cloud, and therefore all our teams are running to the public cloud. Well, that's at least one of the important reasons, I think. So, but it's still very expensive, and I think not a very smart thing to do. But can we enable those people to do things better on premises, right? Yeah. So what is the definition of a cloud native infrastructure? I would say cloud native infrastructure is REST API first built. It is web scale architecture. It doesn't matter in size. It can grow indefinitely, and it is as autonomous as possible. You don't need click operations anymore. Everything can be automated very easily, and or is already automated to a great extent. Well, I hope we know what REST API is, but to give you an idea, the logo on the right bottom, I don't know what color that is, but above the nLogic logo, not the Nutanix one, that's a Dutch second-hand marketplace. And you can really see that it's a SaaS application. You can open up the Chrome debugger and you can see all the API calls going to the backend. Very easy to automate your own market stuff against such a marketplace, right? Nutanix is essentially the same thing. It's full REST API. You can open up the hood, as it's called, and I'll show you later on today, and actually see the API calls coming back. And to me, That is so awesome, because I've been automating infrastructure for more than 10 years, and the toughest part is finding the process, or understanding the process, and then replaying that process into a series of functions and code and logic, right? So that process is the hardest to read in a document. I mean, how do I deploy my new customer? That is something that is your own process. So now you need to relay your own process and translate that into, I know, VMware PowerShell commands. That's going to be a tough one, because you're going to have to figure out every step, every command for every step, right? Because and then figure out how VMware called their PowerCLI commands. While if you have the UI in front of you, and you can simply click your process in the UI and see that process being captured in the Chrome debugger, that's so super easy for me to reverse engineer and to automate something than to actually read any documentation. But that's really personal. I'll show you later on. But that's one of the powers, I think, that an open API platform like Amazon or like Google, you can easily reverse engineer what is built and program and automate things around it. And when I look at legacy vendors, that is really left behind, right? So what does the future look like? I foresee future. Maybe this is a little bit skeptic. I don't know. People can say whatever they want about this, but it's just a guess. In a 5 to 10 year outlook, there will be little to less programmers available for legacy methodologies. Everything will be a DevOps microservices REST API world, or at least as much as possible. There will be no more or very little ClickOps, right? It's already decreasing, and that's primarily because I don't see any people leaving school in the same way I did, right? Joining to be a Windows ClickUp admin. It's all heading towards DevOps application. And infrastructure management is really left behind, or is being done in a DevOps kind of role. So if you don't have this kind of technology ready with a REST API full standard, then some vendors are going to have a hard time. I'm for sure. I come from a previous software vendor, an automation company actually, that had a very, very good automation suite, fully fledged Java based, but it was Java Rhino 1.6 or something, right? So that's really bad. I mean, and it was so heavily hard coded into that engine that they couldn't, basically had to rebuild their whole software to move into this new REST API world. And you already see this when you look at ServiceNow, for example, right? ServiceNow is dominating the market simply because their entire product is REST API based. It is so easy for them to build integrations with public clouds, with whatever open platform we have nowadays, because they are fully REST API based. Yeah, that's my vision there. So, and this is a little bit of a stab at VMware. I hope the audience doesn't mind. I have grown up with VMware as well. And I just know they're behind, right? They are the superior hypervisor, and they have dominated the market for a very long time. They have a very rich product suite. But if you ask me for a legacy world, for a legacy way of working, it is very resource intensive to manage a VMware stack. Whilst if you move your stuff to the public cloud, all that management goes away. So why are we putting so much management in a legacy environment? Why are we adding more consoles and more complexity to something that can be as simple as an Apple interface, right? And it doesn't always have to be this simple, but that's where I'm heading. So yeah, what do we do about on-premise, right? I mean, we got public clouds there. We have all the API capabilities. Our developers can work very fast and agile there, but it costs a lot of money. Intellectual property is not always ideal. Most of the public cloud providers are a direct competitor. If you're in the commercial world, you're either stuck with Google or Azure if you're doing something in the commercial world. And so what are we doing about on-premise, right? We can't just keep hiring people, labeling it as a DevOps role, and then putting them on a legacy infrastructure. They will run away, and the people that can manage the legacy infrastructure will become more and more expensive. So something needs to happen on-premise, and it's not me telling you, but it's just my my vision of how things are changing. Legacy vendors are not API first. If I look at VMware, with all due respect to VMware, and I really love them again, they are not API first. Their API is a spaghetti goat, which is bolted on their massive, huge product suite. Their product suite was not built natively on API. I've seen my previous company fail for the same reason. And that was a very large enterprise American company as well. So VMware is going to have a hard time reinventing their core hypervisor suite to a full API first cloud like stack. And yes, they have a very large community, so they have a large set of tools. But it is all in a legacy thought process with legacy file shares, with legacy ways of working, legacy images process. And I'll try to come back to that more and more during my slide. Yeah, so right, so I'm not sure how many of you are in the service provider world, but trying to build a private cloud like stack on premise right now is just too expensive and too time consuming, because it requires so many tools and so much complexity that it is more expensive to maintain and run than it would be putting it in public cloud. That's not entirely true, but it comes down to the dimes and really cutting the costs in order to make this affordable to running your own stack, right? So it's becoming a more competitive market. So we talked about Nutanix a little bit, and I hope everyone being in this call understands who Nutanix is a little bit. But I'll do a short recap just for the sake of it. But yet, I'll take a short break to dry up my mouth. If there's any questions, please feel to type them in the chat, and I'll just take a little sip. My mouth always dries up when I talk a lot. Yeah, so in a nutshell, what is Nutanix? Nutanix is a hyperconverged inventor, really. I joined Nutanix 1.5 years ago, but the company exists for a little over 10 years now. Basically what they did, they saw, or Google saw Yahoo failing, or Yahoo failed to dominate the search engine internet hype because you couldn't scale their data centers in a good way. And Google was able to do that. Google really took the complexity out of the data centers and said, okay, we're going to standardize whatever pizza boxes we put in here and take away all the complexity that runs here, so we can just have idiots running around with pizza boxes. Sorry for using the words that I'm using. And have them swap pizza boxes and don't care about complexity of SON and fiber channels and any of those things inside a data center, but really put that in a software layer and make sure that the software stack handles all that complexity, so we can do that remotely at scale, indefinitely, and in indefinite size, basically. And what Nutanix did, they saw the technology. Our founder was in Google at that moment, and we saw the technology and we wanted to privatize it and bring it available to the enterprise market instead of just dominating the cloud with it. And so we did, and we invented hyperconvergence technology, which essentially means that you have a standard set of hardware that is able to scale indefinitely and creates a virtual storage layer on top. And I'll share more about it later. But it's really a turnkey solution. We automated this to the maximized extent. It is fully REST API based stack. So think about from bare metal up to a complete private cloud for your customer in 4 hours, turnkey solution. It's a single platform, single interface for everything from your application layer up until the top rack switch, basically. One phone number, one interface, but we try to keep you away from vendor lock-in. And of course, with that, we built an entire bridge to whichever public cloud provider that you wish to choose. And you can have multiple connected to our platform, interacting with the platform dynamically as you wish. So a little bit about the HCI. I'm just scrolling the slide here. So on the left-hand side, you see a traditional three-tier setup. This is what happened in 2001, something, I think, when VMware basically came out with their 1.0 VMware virtualization. This is when x86 became big. I would say in server market it was already big, but it was very inefficient because we would have physical servers for each and every x86 servers, and because of virtualization, and with that also shared storage, the more I would say predominant infrastructure as we know it now was born. However, because of the design of storage and the way we physically created the storage complexity, we had issues with scaling and performance, and it was always a very architectural thing to scale and to size, and that's exactly what I mean. We took away that complexity, just like Google did, and we converted that to in software-based technology, basically giving you one stack, one phone number with everything from your application or container to your top of rack switch in one platform. How does that platform work? It's a little bit boring stuff, but don't worry, it's just for everyone to get a little bit of a refresh on what Nutanix does and where our foundings are. So how does the platform work? With a minimum of 3 nodes, that's really where our technology starts to work. We can have 1 and 2 node configurations, but 3 node configuration is really where technology starts to work. It's Cassandra-based metadata ring, and you basically have those pizza boxes with their own disks, and each of those pizza boxes have a hypervisor on them. The hypervisor is of your choice. We support 4 different hypervisors, I think. We also have our own hypervisor, which is included in the price. And on top of that hypervisor, whether it's ESX, Hyper-V, or our own hypervisor, that runs our controller virtual machine, which is essentially the software controller that establishes the relationship with the other controller virtual machines in the cluster, and then elects a leader. Once the leader is elected, the storage, the distributed storage fabric, as you can see in the bottom, is established. And that's essentially when the storage layer is running below the hypervisors, as you would see in the left-hand side of the image. So it's still that traditional way of attaching storage is physically there, but not really, because it is a very different way of handling storage. Because we own the entire stack from hypervisor to disks, we can do very intelligent things, taking away a lot of idiocracy things we've been doing for many years. Think about disk swaps. You don't swap necessarily a disk in Nutanix. There's no degraded state in your RAID volume if your disk fails. There's no such thing. It's just a pool of disks, and the pool of disks makes sure there's 2 copies on 2 different nodes in a replication factor 2, right? So there's no such thing as if a disk fails that you need to drive to the data center to swap a disk. It doesn't work like that in Nutanix. It's completely different. And there are also many other technologies that allow us to do fast and quick pass-throughs to the host to get the ultra performance on the VM. To tell you the whole cloud story, I always run through the whole product suite a little bit more. I'm hoping I'm not boring everyone to death here. Some slides have a little bit more on the cloud API story than the others. Others are just for recap. Just to understand what I'm talking about. So Acropolis operating system is one of the topics. Acropolis operating system is the operating system running on the controller virtual machine, basically handling the storage layer, handling the upgrades, handling the compression, the IOs, and everything related to storage, right? And as you can see, the controller virtual machine is owner of the SCSI controller, and the hypervisor boots off a different M2 SATA lane. Right, so the controller virtual machine is actually owner of the disks, and all controller virtual machines in the cluster manage the pool of disks. Essentially how it works. One-click upgrade process. So next to that, everything in the UI, and I'll also show you in a minute, I think, yeah, is API based. So I'm going to show you things in API, but I'm also going to show a few things in the UI. But everything I do in API anyway. I built an app for Nutanix that completely orchestrates the demo environment from scratch for all our products. So, and of course, that's 100% REST API based. I do it in PowerShell. If you're interested, I'll drop the share and the link in the chat later, so you guys can check out the repo. One-click upgrade process. So our software comes with our hardware comes with firmware. This comes with firmware. Our software needs to be upgraded. You name it, right? And think about the vCenter upgrade guide, where you have to check your fiber channel controller firmware on your on your fiber channel card in all your ESXi hosts just before you can hit the upgrade button. And that preparing that upgrade already takes you a week of change window planning and nightmares. While in a public cloud, there's nothing like this, right? There's no such thing as upgrades. The cloud stack takes care of that for you, and that's their responsibility. So when you put this on a private property or a private data center, pressing the update button is still your own responsibility, but we take care of the entire process behind it. So there's no complexity for you to think about in regards to compatibility. Because you choose Nutanix, we give you the possibility to choosing between hardware, different vendors, and therefore we know which controller, which firmware there is in what machine, and we can tell whether or not before you do the hypervisor upgrade that you need to do the firmware upgrade of your disks first, right? It was actually something I noticed later a couple of weeks ago. I was trying to upgrade the hypervisor and it wouldn't let me. And I was like, why can't you let me upgrade the hyper? Because the full automated process would have done the disks first, and there was a dependency with the disk, and it showed there was a dependency with the disk. So it was nice to actually see that dependency play out in this one, because yeah, it's difficult to explain. So the one-click upgrade process offloads that entire way of having to plan your updates or having to do anything about it. It's just one click, and there you go. So let me try to show you. Yeah, we can do API also if you want. I was planning that. I have to prepare that in a few minutes. Feel free to ask questions in the meanwhile. Just power on my. Oh no, I see it's typing the wrong password. So Prism comes in two different forms. There's a Prism element and Prism Central. Right now we're looking at Prism Central. That's essentially Central Cluster Manager. And within Prism Central, there's a module called Lifecycle Manager. And Lifecycle Manager in Prism Central will take care of all the software elements that are running in Prism Central. So in this case, it sees the Acropolis operating system. It sees the COM automation engine version. This is the UI engine version. This is the Kubernetes engine. This is the objects engine. This is the alert engine, another object manager, and the entity itself.
Michel, we see the slides only.
Oh, okay. Then I'm sharing my.
You do infrastructure as code, is that right, at home?
Yeah.
Probably the reason.
No. New share. Here we go. It's only allowing me. It's not displaying my my screens. That's the problem. It's just showing my windows, but that's fine. I can switch like this.
There we have it. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sorry. Yeah. So this is Prism Central, Lifecycle Manager. You can perform inventories. It will scan the inventory and give you the results of whatever software components there are in this stack. I can also do this one level lower. This would be the Prism element environment. This is the physical cluster below. Prism Central is the Central Cluster Manager. And I can do it in Prism element, same thing. I automated this as well. It's simple API calls to run the inventory. This one is actually still running. Probably can't do anything with it while it's running. And so it is really very easy to update your entire stack, whether it's firmware, BIOS, software, whatever you want. You can do single selections, you can do per node selections, but you can also say, okay, I trust Nutanix, and it does a pre-flight check, checks all the conditions, if there's enough resources, if there's any error conditions, if it's safe to bring down the cluster, or actually put one node in maintenance and fail over the resources to the other nodes, so that the cluster can automatically evict all its resources one by one, reboot the nodes, do their BIOS upgrades, etc., etc. And of course, the great power of it is that it's also doable through API. I was trying to show you that. Yeah. I need to switch screens again. Yeah, sorry for the silence. Oh, here we go. Yeah. I usually don't practice this exercise, but let me see. Maybe we can, you should see my my other machine now, right?
Yes.
Is it okay in regards to size, or should I try to zoom it somehow?
I think it's good. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, now I have to quickly look up something else. Looking at my code. So I have quite a large GitHub repo. If you're interested in PowerShell with Nutanix, I basically wrote a very large bunch of modules, very large amount of modules to basically control any product in Nutanix. It's very easy to automate. I've reverse engineered most things myself, perform inventory. No. There we go. I wonder what this will return, to be honest, but let's see. I'm basically loading a function now that will iterate exactly what you saw in the UI. Will iterate the UI and query all the modules, and then finding the installed versions. Here we go. Available update list. And so in this case, it finds all the versions, but I was searching for available updates. And in this case, there are no versions listed, so there are no available updates. There's another call that does the same thing. But this is a collection of PowerShell functions that have been written to gather the information from Nutanix. And it's very easy to do because it's all object-oriented. Because it's REST API, you can just do an invoke REST method against the URL and then get your call back. And you have exactly the thing you need to do to automate. Okay. Oh. New share. I hope that answers the question a little bit. I can show the functions, but I don't want to get into too much of the nuts and bolts. If you're interested in the functions or something, ping me and we can talk about it later. Right, the slide deck. Right, so in a nutshell, the Acropolis operating system, a little bit about the hypervisor. Our hypervisor is, I would say, 5 years old now. I'm not sure, 5 years old, I think. It's based on Amazon's hypervisor, same thing, all KVM based. So we use QCOW images, a very stable hypervisor. We've forked it to our own version, added lots of enterprise capable features. Features are listed here to the left-hand side. But because we also own the hypervisor and the code, and we also own the storage layer, we can do very cool things in bypassing virtualization for storage, for example, so we can really throttle the amount of bandwidth that the VM can get, because we're directly allowing the VM to talk to iSCSI on the storage layer, basically, therefore removing any overhead. Our scheduler looks a little bit different, works a little bit different, because we don't search for an equilibrium in CPU usage and memory usage. We essentially make sure that the CPU usage is balanced across I/O heavy resources and of course CPU heavy resources. So it's an equilibrium of storage I/O plus VM I/O plus memory, where we try to keep a balance, and that may appear sometimes that a cluster is unbalanced, but it works differently than what you would be knowing from a VMware environment. And this is an example of how we increase velocity by bypassing the entire virtual I/O QEMU driver for the disk, and we directly pass the storage path to the storage layer. Then technology is volume group balancing. It's a little bit abstract to talk about this, but think of it as a mesh topology. If you have one SON and you put one ASX node on that one SON, that one SON will be very fast and that VM will be very fast, right? Because you're putting the storage computing power of 40 nodes on and granting that to just one node, and that one node is able to take all the SON's computing power until the fiber channel exhausts. But that is also the reason why that doesn't scale, right? And is that always that important? So in an HCI solution, and it doesn't matter which one, what you get is that well, it does matter which one. What you get is that additional nodes will add up into the computing power of the SON. Each pizza box uses literally 3 physical cores for its computing for its storage computing power, right? Because you don't have a SON controller anymore, you don't have SON memory banks anymore. That's all virtualized in the pizza box. Yeah, think about the Google data centers, right? Because you scale per node, that computing power also scales up per node, but it is also capped per node. So by default, you will not get more computing power, more storage computing power, sorry for using the wrong word, on one VM than that single node can give to you, right? So if that node is capped on 10,000 IOPS for whatever reason, because of disk or spindle performance, then that VM will never get more than 10,000 IOPS. I'm just making up the numbers, right? While with volume group load balancing, we can really say, okay, we have 4 nodes in the cluster. These group of disks are being granted the computing power, the storage computing power, I keep saying it wrong, the storage computing power of all 4 nodes or all 20 nodes or whatever you wish, and give that to that single VM. That's how we can grant RDMA performance for things like SAP HANA. SAP HANA is certified to run on our HCI platform. Microsoft Exchange is, we are the only HCI provider certified to run Exchange in regards to storage I/O. Right, so because of this technology, so our technology makes it bypasses the limitation of the limited computing power a single node would have. But again, you would only need that in exceptional cases, whilst the majority of your machines are fine with a normal IOPS performance. Sorry for stepping away on that one. This is really something that I do think is a cloud feature. If you look at VMware, and we've been doing things in Windows even for decades, for a decade now, is putting files in folders, getting a massive tree structure of garbage. Whilst if you look at Apple they took a whole different approach, and storage is from a whole different angle. If you take a look at cloud, everything is going to be object storage driven. There's no more folder structure and file structure. There's no more, hey Eddie, where did you put the Windows ISO image and which data store? Oh, which folder? Oh, okay, I got it. Yeah, I got it. Let's hope this is the right one. No, it's an object. It is an object, and it has an object identifier. There's no folder structure anymore, and that's really what we do as well. We make the ease of managing images. You can upload any image format to our platform, and it will be converted to the image format that your hypervisor requires. You don't have to worry about that, you don't have to think about folder structures or anything. The image, once uploaded, gets an object identifier and can be provisioned, used in VMs by calling the same object identifier. It's no longer a path, it's just an object in an object store, right? So it's a lot more cloud way of thinking. It's the same thing about templates. I think it's my next slide, actually. Yeah. Same thing about templates. Building a real template, as we used to do that in a VMware world, that doesn't exist in a cloud world anymore, right? Because operating systems deploy unattendedly without you having to put any binaries in that operating system. So you can use whatever binaries your vendor is supplying directly, so you don't have to do image management or image maintenance or image distribution or that whole crap, because your hypervisor requires you to install a tool in their guest OS, in your guest OS, because otherwise they can't talk inside the guest OS, or even mass deploy the guest OS without that tool being installed. And again, I'm bashing a little bit against VMware, but that's not really bashing. It is more where they come from. I mean, that's not a bad thing. That's how we grew up, literally. I hope you can see the same smile on my face as I am having. So it's where we come from. It's how we used to do things, and the cloud has changed that. So we have to do that. We have to embrace that change and have a different thought process, and that applies to so many things. And I think templates, images versus objects, that's all the same reason. So how do we do it in Nutanix? We don't require a guest tool. We use cloud native mass deployment tools such as Cloud Init and sysprep. There's only one reason you would have a Nutanix guest tool in your VM, is if you want to have the snapshots talk to the VSS provider. So if you want to have your snap consistent backups for database related applications, then you need the Nutanix guest tools in your guest VM. But you don't need it just to mass deploy the guest operating system. If I take an example, I'm not sure, I need to have my slide deck open. If I take the example of building a new VMware image, I have to download it. Yeah, it's actually my next slide. I was searching for it. If I take a VMware platform, a legacy environment where I grew up in, and I was deploying a Windows image, I would have to download the Windows ISO, build a VM with the Windows ISO, install VMware tools. If I would, I patch the ISO, but nowadays that's not needed anymore because they release them separately. But I would have to install the VMware tools in order to even give it an IP address if I'd mass deploy it using VMware, because VMware doesn't understand sysprep. VMware requires you to install guest tools and requires you to mass deploy using their guest tools, which doesn't work for most Linux operating systems with the open VMware tools, because you can't even set the IP address, right? So that takes me a whole day, if not longer, to download, edit, deploy, convert, and then test that image. Whilst if you do this in a public cloud way, you take whatever Amazon image that looks okay, as a matter of speech, right? And you throw a sysprep on top that generalizes it for your settings, and you're done. You don't need to do image copy management. You just have one config file, which is your sysprep. And that's exactly how it works in Nutanix as well. I actually already have the environment loaded, so I can quickly show you this. Oh, sorry. I have to change screens a couple of times because it doesn't allow me to overlay. If all okay, you could see my main screen now with my taskbar items and the Sublime editor. You see my mouse moving, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. So what this does is very simple. It downloads this image and sends a cloud in it to that image and mass deploys it 7 times without me having to touch the image even at all, because I'm on a VPN. If I would have to download the image through my VPN, it would take forever. But I'm just telling the platform, go download this image, give me the object identifier back for whatever you did, and then I'm going to deploy 7 VMs using that image, its object identifier basically, and giving it an IP address and a name. Of course, but for that I need to do a little prep. Sorry for that. Oh yeah, here we are. I'm trying to find free IP range because otherwise my script will crash. Yeah, I think 105 will work. So that's 55.97.105. Yeah, and then it will fail on 109 or something, I think. So it will do a couple and then it will start failing. Yeah, 109 is the first one it will hit. That's fine. It will do 3 if I'm correct. So changing my screen share again. Back into the same screen I was before with the patches available. And of course blindly, right? This is not tested. I have not seen this block ever. This environment I have built autonomously with the code, of course, but I'm just doing this without any previous testing. So of course I've built this before, but not on this cluster. So what it's doing is it's getting the container list. It's putting the image in the container name that I told it to put it in, because we do have different containers. So I'm getting container UID, and then I know in which container to put it. So here I sent the image to the platform, and now it is looping and waiting with a 10-second interval, and it will report back to me in 40 seconds, giving me the first status update on the image upload. As I said, I'm on a VPN right now. This image is not going through my laptop or my desktop, whatever. It's just going directly to the platform. Again, thinking about API world, I'm just commanding and controlling the platform to do what I want. This cluster is actually in the US. And so it should download this image quite quickly. It's only a few hundred megabytes. Surprised it was only at 1% on the first interval. Did everybody fall asleep, or so busy with their pizza? No questions? I'm just joking. Yeah, so the second interval came in, and I'm progressing. Basically, I'm monitoring the task that you would see in Prism, right? Is essentially you're seeing the same thing. Oh, there we went. Image is uploaded. You got the UUID back. Oh, that's not good. Probably because the NIC config isn't good. Let me check the VM. Still made a typo somewhere. Why is that failing? Is this not valid or something? Oh, it's not valid. Yeah, okay. Ah, see? I'm an idiot. I put an extra dot in the prefix thingy, so. There you go. It's always human errors. And there's the first one. And yeah, it will loop a couple of times until it runs out of free IP addresses, and then it will start complaining that the IP address is in use. Of course, I could have used dynamic IP addressing and those kind of things. Also, something I want to mention that area. If you build a VMware stack, and the first thing you do once you get your hypervisor up to your vCenter console, you need a VM. You power on the VM, but what do you need to do then? You need to set an IP address because there is no IPAM, there's no DHCP. So you need to go inside the guest without you being able to go inside the guest. So that's already a problem, right? It's a very different thought process. In a Amazon, Google, and Nutanix, you can have the ability to just enable IPAM on your network, and you can send the IPAM IP address. I'm actually doing that with this code or not? No, I'm actually doing the cloud in it with IP address. But I would be able to tell Nutanix IPAM to reserve the IP address in IPAM before the machine was powered on, so it would automatically get that IP address, just like you would have in a public cloud. Yeah, now it's pretty much done. I think it's hitting a bump now. Yeah, it's already complaining it can't even power on one. Not sure why. So where was I? IPAM, yes. It is very easy to use because it's all thought of a cloud-like process, remote infrastructure, mass deploy, endless scalability, those kind of thought processes, zero maintenance, autonomous maintenance, less complexity instead of more complexity. All those things you will see in Nutanix. Trying to give the customer the perfect UI where it is simple to manage an operating stack with just one resource profile, or a full API stack in the bottom that allows you to automate a full private cloud stack to the greatest extent of your customer. Let me try to bring up my slide again. Yep. Yeah. So we've seen the Prism interface already a little bit, but let me tell you what it is. So Prism interface is really the REST API, the HTML5 engine talking REST API to the backend. And because it works like that, you can also really see that the calls going from the UI to the backend, and therefore automate literally anything you want. I can try to show you, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so
Michelle, maybe jump into the COM part also to show the.
Yeah. That's right after this one. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay.
So, as you can see here, this is exactly my API call. This is my endpoint. This is a JSON body. I'm not even sending a JSON body because this is a GET call. Yeah. Right. So you can easily see the response and what entities have been returned, and with that automate your exact thing you want to do. In PowerShell, this becomes an object. You can simply set the value to a new value in that object and post the object back to the API, and that's allowing you to make a change. So it's so easy to literally automate every single command, and that's what you get when you do overhead technologies like PowerShell tools or anything that you put in between will just limit the amount of things you can automate. And then halfway down your process, right? Remember that process that you want to automate. Then halfway down, you go, okay, this is a single thing I cannot automate, and the whole thing stops, and then your velocity goes back to waiting for a human resource, right? So I hope that in a nutshell makes the story a little bit make sense. And yes, I was just finished with the core, and I'll move on to the calm side of the house. One thing that is worthwhile mentioning is the Xplay module. I can skip the demo if you like, but Xplay allows you to automate infrastructure alerts. So Nutanix platform is very easy to automate, to operate, but also very easy to automate. So if you have an infrastructure alert, you can use Xplay to act on those infrastructure alerts, whether it is forward to ServiceNow, or trigger an email, or send a Slack message, or fire off something in Calm, or send a report, whatever you like. Very easy, click point. I want this to happen when this occurs. And with that is also my bridge to Calm. So let me fire off the Xplay demo. We're 1 hour in now, right? Yeah. Yeah. So in Prism Central, there is something called playbooks, and playbooks allow you to automate infrastructure alerts, as I said it. Oh yeah. Sorry. It's tricky. I always share by the principle of sharing my entire screen, and with this webinar, I'm required to share every window. So it's tricky sometimes. So this is playbooks. This is in Prism Central Management. You can see this is your VROps equivalent manager console. And within the operations menu, there's a playbook, action gallery, and plays. There was a little bit more. Action gallery and plays. Action galleries are the built-in actions that you can do, and the plays are the execution log, basically, of the playbooks. So from the playbook perspective, looking at a custom playbook that I built here, what it essentially does, it fires off the VM CPU usage of the DevOps application tag. So you can assign tags and categories to VMs, and if a VM or a group of or the whole group of VMs exceeds a certain threshold, you can fire off whatever you want to do on that group of VMs. And in this case, it is actually firing off a Calm blueprint. It does that in JSON format in an open call. Let me see if I can actually show this working while we jump to Calm. There we are. Let's hope this one works. Oh yes, here we go. So what we have done, we've deployed an IIS web server, Windows 2012. Well, what is this? Choose a different account. And there's an IIS web server on top, and it runs its own load balancer. Now, this IIS web server runs a commercial app, and in the middle of the night, the commercial goes live. somebody forgot to scale out the service, and all of a sudden there's a massive amount of web requests coming in. So the CPU load of the machine exceeds a certain threshold, and with that the X-Play book is fired, and Calm will add an additional VM to its entire setup. Let me share my screen where I'm actually working. It's a bit nicer for you. So this is the IIS web server. I hope you can see the screen. Heavy load. I'm just gonna generate a CPU load on that machine. Hope it's not too boring for everyone. No. What the hell? Yeah. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So while it loads, I'll switch to Calm right away because we're running a little bit low on time, I see.
A question, Michelle.
Yeah.
Are you able to share links to code libraries, script libraries afterwards?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Information? Yeah, good.
Yeah, I have my own GitHub repo. It's being monitored by Nutanix if I ever commit passwords or anything like that.
Yeah.
Just joking. Yeah, there's a lot of PowerShell stuff. Basically, all you can do with Nutanix is in there in PowerShell. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I am no better than PowerShell. I'm pretty good in PowerShell, but nothing else. Yeah, that's my limitation. As we can see, CPU usage is hammering, so it will take like 5 or 10 minutes. So I'll just continue with my story. In the meanwhile, let me just show the CPU utilization here. You can see my Prism screen now again, right?
Yes.
So this is my IIS web server. It belongs to the app family DevOps group. You can see it here. It has the tag, and then you can also see that the alert policy is assigned to that tag. And we'll be monitoring the CPU usage while we proceed. And once I see it complete, it should add another balloon here. It doesn't even detect the last spike yet. So yeah, we have to wait for this one. Let me proceed on the next one. So in essential, that is the Nutanix core, what we're talking about. Right, it's a powerful platform that allows you to work with storage, work with hypervisors, fully API-based, upgrade the entire stack with a single-click operation or a single API call, mass deploy operating system, mass deploy customers, automate infrastructure day 2 operations, and all those kind of things. So this one we've done. And if
we're still in Prism.
Oh, yeah. sorry. Oh, that's the wrong one.
We have it.
Yeah, no, that's the internal one, I think. Yeah, we want this one. Yeah. So to me, something being native API is much more important than something API bolted on. VMware API, with all due respect, is a lot bolted on. Still, I think they are the mature hypervisor, but in API world, they are just not that far because they literally have to rewrite the whole software. And instead of doing that, they're adding more consoles and more complexity and more bolt-on tools, which is the exact opposite direction as I think we should be heading with IT infrastructure, because it's becoming commodity. It has become commodity, and the DevOps role will take over. And that's really my vision in that respect. Right. Calm and orchestration. So Next to the fact that it's being a full API platform, we also have an own automation engine that allows you to automate all kinds of things in a very complex way or in a very easy way, whatever you wish, actually. It's like the whole platform, it's completely API driven. So, and that is really cool because I'm not sure if you're developers, but if you put things like your own code in VRA or VRO or wherever you store your code in order to execute it, you will always be maintaining two sets of code. One is in GitHub or not, and the other one is in the tool. So what are you doing with the code in the tool? Can you get it out? VRA up to version 7, you couldn't even get it out, right? Because it's a full API platform, I'm not even using COM to edit my code. I'm simply injecting the code into COM. Think about that for a second, right? So it's completely open. So you get a lot more capabilities if you think about CI/CD pipeline, because you can really make it a lot more dynamic and automate your own automation, so to speak, right? But that's a little bit too complex and too much to begin with. I'm sorry for that. I got carried away. But in essence, COM came from an origin where you can automate the lifecycle management of your application, upgrading, but also reducing the silos, number of silos and complexity that you do with normal application landscaping. Imagine that the factory plant manager in his night shift notices that the factory is stalled, and he knows exactly what needs to happen. That process needs to be restarted, but he cannot, because he cannot SSH to the box, and he's not allowed to. He's not an IT staff, but he knows exactly what needs to happen. But instead, he needs to call the help desk or the service desk in the middle of the night and have somebody restart the process just so the factory can continue its shift. Whilst if you could very easily present that capabilities to the application owner, or in this case, the plant owner, that process would be very easy to be remediated. So that's what we try to do with COM. We try to bring more self-service control to the end user, creating less fragility in application ownership, and we allow that to be done in any infrastructure, whether it's your legacy VMware, public cloud, you want to deploy a VM in Amazon, fine. You can deploy your LAMP instance or your WordPress instance exactly the way you want it in Amazon, Google, on-premise, or whatever location you wish on the launch of such a blueprint. So those blueprints are essentially the layout, the drawing of how the application should look like. It contains the code, the script, but it doesn't contain the binaries. It does contain pointers to binaries, so we are able to download images and maintain the binaries within the same set of code. So essentially what you're getting is a large JSON, an object that's defining how your application should look like and what self-service capabilities your application should have. It visually represents as code, but what is very cool about COM is normally when you do orchestration, you have to think about what's first and what comes next. So where's the chicken and what's the egg? Orchestrating, right? Process. With COM, it's very easy to build several machines without having to think about how these machines interact. COM will automatically map out the dependencies. I'll show you later on because it's very hard to explain. Of course, the self-service portal, like I said, you can assign custom tasks to an application. So an application owner can restart something, or an application owner can create a snapshot or even restore a snapshot through self-service portal, but also provision a new workload from the marketplace. Nutanix comes with a marketplace of 15 unique blueprints in each of 4 versions, I think. So it comes with like 200 different versions of 50 blueprints, so 200 total blueprints, which you can edit to your own needs and then publish in the marketplace so your users can consume it. This all works project-based. Just a little bit too soon. Yeah, this is what I said earlier, right? So we try to reduce the complexity of the larger application landscape by granting more capabilities to the application owner, which often does know exactly what needs to be done, but cannot do it because he's not authorized to go into that level of the infrastructure, right? So we reduce the knowledge silos, number of knowledge silos, so the knowledge silos itself become more intelligent. And of course, we allow the control of giving you a unique profile of deploying something on-prem today or deploying something in Google Cloud tomorrow. You can also start deploying in cloud and then use our migration tools to move it back on-premise, or the other way around. What do you want? Calm doesn't migrate workloads because there's still a data path that has to change. We have other tools for that, right? So Calm is not a workload mover. It can deploy and orchestrate workloads and give you the self-service capabilities that you like with that. As I said before, I was running ahead of my story. It runs on any platform. So it needs to run on top of Nutanix, Prism Central, and then you can control whatever three-tier VMware, public cloud, or Nutanix infrastructure you want to control with it. The marketplace I already told you about. These are just blueprints written by our teams together with the vendors, and they are maintained together with the vendors. So you'll see multiple of these in here. Yeah, self-service interface is a complete RBAC capability. So you can grant complete RBAC control to projects as it works, right? So every project has its own quota. Every project can have its own Active Directory even. So you can point every project to an own LDAP and really separate your users, your images, and your items from there. Marketplace, blueprints is all segregated by those projects. So you can publish to whatever project you want. Same with Carbon. We will revisit that at the last slot. Carbon is the Nutanix container solution. It also works with the same RBAC interface, so you can download your kube config, giving you temporary access to a Kubernetes cluster through that same RBAC interface. Same applies to Era, which is your database orchestration tool. I'll revisit that later. Right? Yeah, that was that. So the project is also configured with an environment, pre-configured with an environment, so the project knows what to deal with. Each project can have its own Amazon provider. It can have multiple Amazon providers. It can have a Nutanix provider. It can have a Carbon provider, and those are all configured in the environment for that project, and that defines how the application is deployed essentially. Yeah. Thinking what is the nicest one to show. Okay. Change my screen share. Right. By the way, we were talking about IaaS scale XPlay. You can see that the CPU usage has spiked, created an alert. We have the alert here. We can already see Calm creating the VM, I think. Let's see. It's exciting times. So let's pick up the playbook first. Questions, playbooks, plays, and there we go. My playbook is fired. Again, this is all untested. This is my. I'm trying to look for the results. No. Yeah. I'm looking at it from the wrong angle. I think I'm looking at it from the wrong angle. Right. This is what I was looking for. So you can see the replies and the actions and the actual trigger firing it off and the conditions that it run under. So that means that it did something to Calm. Told Calm to build me another IaaS VM. So let's check out Calm. Before I show you how Calm works, I'll dive immediately into where it's landing. It's the applications view, and we should see an IaaS server being provisioned. Here we are, and we can see that it's actually building the IaaS server right now. It's provisioning a new VM, and with that, its entire audit log and its task sequence. So I'm looking at zooming down into the tasks that it's actually doing. You can see it's joining domain, installing IaaS, creating a website, waiting for the IP config change, and then adding it to the load balancer. So it's almost done already. Yep. Quick overview, and then so this is an application, right? From an application management point of view. Right now it's provisioning. It will enter a running state, like the other applications. But I'll revisit here once I've had the top-down view. A little bit of a walkthrough. This is the marketplace. As I said, I published all the blueprints. You can open a blueprint and see what kind of licenses it uses, what is it suitable for. This one is only for AHV. It's a little bit boring. Let me find something I know that works for other places. I don't know. I'm just guessing now. Yeah, so this is a Kubernetes blueprint. Don't get it wrong. This is not our Docker, our Carbon implementation, but this is just a Kubernetes blueprint that allows you to automatically install Kubernetes and even scale up and scale down features. I think it has lifecycle, scale up, scale down, and upgrade functionality. So this is a pretty nice blueprint. It supports different network providers, different versions, and so you can use it, but you can also customize it to your own need, clone it or launch it. You can see what kind of capabilities that it has. These are the buttons I was talking about. These buttons can be customized. The top 3 buttons are custom, and the bottom 6 are always included. That gives you a little bit of idea on the marketplace. So you can publish blueprints to marketplaces or version control, release system, etc., etc. You can add your own icons and really give an app experience to your end users. So they really have no idea what they're doing. All they're doing is they're ordering a new app, right? And that's a little bit how our consumption community is like nowadays. But yes. Just a second, I have something incoming. Is it urgent? Sorry. Right. So marketplace blueprint view. This is where your blueprints, literally the word as it is, are stored and managed and edited. This is also the designer view. I won't go too much into the details now. I'll revisit that later. But this is the blueprint that we will be looking at later. You can have different versions of blueprints, and this is the designer. You would edit your package sequence in, just to give you the idea. This is the package sequence that we were looking at just now. Oh, this is a different box actually. Right, so that's the blueprint view, and we'll revisit that just when I'm done here. So this is the application view. Depending on your RBAC role, you will have one or more of these icons. Some can only see apps or read the values or read the costs of it. Cost is already enabled, but it's not showing chargeback yet. So you can see what kind of costs are incurred on this project. And of course, I'm seeing all items in all projects now, but you would only see your own workloads. And you would be able to click on your workload as your app owner and then execute actions. Refresh clone, for example, right? If you're a database administrator, if you're a developer, you don't have to talk to your database administrator. You can simply refresh your clone here. Task library, where you can reuse and store your code and actually call from the task libraries to reuse your code. Very handy. We will have Git integration soon as well. There's some settings for Nutanix where we enable the marketplace apps. We enable showback. That's the dollar value to CPU resources. If you enable it, it asks you how many dollars does your CPU cost per hour, etc. And if you put in those values, it will literally calculate based on the number of hours that the workload was actually running, how much costs were incurred during that time. So if the app owner only had his VM running 2 hours that month, he will only be, or Nutanix will only show the charges incurred for those 2 hours. So it's really handy if you want to cross-charge for your departments. If you want to do service provider kind of cost overview, I would recommend looking into Nutanix Beam. It is a overlapping solution for both Calm on-premise and public cloud resources like Google, Amazon, and Azure to give you the best location and the best price for your workload and best recommendation. It would really say, okay, this is a workload with a lot of CPU power requirements. This is best to put in Google because they have the best price for CPU power at night. Those kind of cost calculations you can do there. And of course, changing the default landing page, so Prism becomes your Calm only portal. It's really a function to use Calm as a standalone instance. And of course, your providers I was talking about earlier, and of course the Nutanix provider is configured, but also my Carbon provider is configured, which is a Kubernetes built into Nutanix. So you can also not only deploy VMs, but also talk YAML or JSON to pods through Calm. So you can really use Calm and their API capabilities to directly link your CI/CD pipeline into building the actual workloads or distributing them amongst your clusters. This is the approval store for your marketplace, not that exciting. And these are the projects and how the customer projects are defined, who's doing what kind of RBAC is attached, and what kind of resources are assigned to that project. So I could have several Amazon providers assigned to project 1 and have several Google providers assigned to several project customer 2, right? So that's segregation. A little bit on how a blueprint looks. We're going to look at, I'm going to do complex right away. Yeah, let's start simple. Well, this is reasonably simple. You can see that my design here is poor. There's too many steps. It doesn't look nice anymore. But basically what it does, it builds one VM. It actually builds my demo app. It builds one VM, which is one service. It's registered here. But my service can also be a pod, so I can also register a pod here and add it as a container, right? Now I need to remove it. No, delete. Yeah. And inside that VM, this is the VM definition. How does it look like? What are the specs? This is my sysprep XML, right? I'm just using a general image. The image is configured here. So it downloads QCOW from Dropbox. So this works wherever you install it because it's not depending on local binaries. And other things come from Chocolate Tree Public. Each step just sequences until the last step is finished and the app becomes in a running state. Once it's in a running state, these buttons can be used and called upon. You can edit the buttons here to design. So this is a very simple way of showing a multi-VM environment. This is a multi-VM view. You can also create a more simplistic view in a single VM blueprint. Before I do that live and actually run a single VM blueprint with you, I want to show you a more complex one that also I wrote. It's the Zen Desktop blueprint. This is one of my more, I would say, complex blueprints in Calm. It's also very large. I hope it is a little bit okay to see, to read. Try to make it a little bit better, but usually that ends up in more nightmares. Yeah, it doesn't get any better than this. So Calm is very cool if it comes to variables, variable dependency, variable scoping, and the way variables are used and understood. And I'm not sure how technical the audience is, so I won't go too deep in it, but it is a very powerful way of managing your variables. So there's different scopes. To talk about that first, the application profile scope. That's where you define most of your variables. You could see this as your root level scope of variables. These variables exist with the same value in the same place everywhere. And then there's task level variables that can exist on the service. So there's a service variable here called machine type app. And actually the machine type on this service is called MGT, right? So there are different values for each service, but the same variable name. So with that, you also create different scopes. Let me try to show you how a variable looks like inside COM. So this is PowerShell code a little bit, but also on the right-hand side of the equal sign, you can see the curly braces, and that's actually the COM variable syntax. So when I type that in the COM text editor, it will suggest whatever variable I want to use. And you can see that everything is defined as a service and defined as a variable can be selected and used upon. Now I know this is not a variable, I know this is a service, and it has a sub value that I can actually query. So it is not only stupid strings that you can manipulate and send over, it is entire arrays of objects that COM can send to your scripting language of choice, which is Bash, built in Python or PowerShell. So it's really easy to use COM variables. But what happens if you do that? So if you do that in a more complex scale, right? So COM automatically maps dependencies. How? Well, this is a very large blueprint. This is 2 SQL servers, 3 application medical app servers. This is a blueprint for Zen app, Zen desktop actually, for a medical app in hospitals. The medical app is legacy principles. They release a new code every month or 2, and it needs to be tested in a Zen desktop environment. So the hospitals need to spin up a Zen desktop environment for 2 months to test 1 cycle of 1 app release, and then keep it running for 2 months and then use it again without being able to reinstall it, or it's very labor intensive. So this blueprint installs the entire app, including Zen desktop, with all the separate app roles, exactly as they would in prod, with the settings that it can choose which tier they want to send it to. I'll try to show it running in a minute. But just to give you the context. So here are 2 SQL servers. One is used for the medical app, and the other one is used for the Citrix backend servers. This is where the Citrix backend servers are installed. There's 4 Citrix backend servers. And the code itself differentiates between the nodes. Now, where I'm going to is because I'm using the SQL instance name variable inside my Zen app backend server, and I've declared that variable inside my SQL server install. COM automatically knows that there's a dependency between the database and the SQL instance. And as you can see in the kind of Picasso drawing that COM generates, is the dependency between the left-hand server here going out. So this line going out to my backend server saying I cannot install my backend server until my SQL server is done. So and that's really cool. That's the automatic dependency mapping of COM. And that really allows you to do application orchestration in a much more easier way, because this is generated by COM. And if you create an indefinite loop, COM will warn you about it, although it is very rare that that occurs. Thinking about what am I forgetting? Yeah, COM can store secure credentials. Credentials are not stored in the blueprint. You can choose to do that if you want to, but it's not required. And in a nutshell, this is completely open API, right? So the code you put in here is readable, is injectable. If I read this JSON in PowerShell, PowerShell is an object. The script code that you saw here, click ops, is actually injected through my Git commit. So I'm not even putting the code, copy pasting the code in here anymore. I'm just injecting it through my Git commit, because it's all API anyway, and I can talk to COM in an API manner. So that's really powerful of COM, if you ask me. Now let me show you the single VM blueprint. So this is what you would do if you would be a starter in COM, and this would be your first blueprint to write. nLogic. And let me just, I'm not sure if that one's configured correctly. Okay, I want a new VM. This is a demo workshop. I want to put this in my Nutanix cloud. I want to choose Windows. And I don't want to put in all those settings of sysprep, so I'm just going to clone from my environment where this is all pre-configured. right? Because I've pre-configured this in the environment of this project. I can still review it. It shows me the dialog and the change. It shows me that it's going to use this image. It's all essentially all fine. I'm just checking if I needed to add anything else. Yes, I need to change the delay of the login check. I think, where's my login check? Where is my... Nix. Yeah. Oh wait, that's in the next page. Yeah. Duh. There's no credentials here yet, so the admin. Like that. And now I have a credential, and I can also check that it should check the OS for login. This is obviously done through PowerShell remoting. So basic steps 1, 2, 3, and then there's an advanced, and in the advanced I can configure some credentials, but also do some installations. This is really the point-click easy way to do your first blueprint. I want to execute something, I have a new task, execute. I can also set variables, delay, or do an HTTP call, but I want to execute something. And I can choose between bash escript, which is our own Python. This runs on the platform, and this runs on endpoints. In this case, I'm going to use PowerShell and just say hello world. Of course, it can't be more original than that, right? Done, and I should be able to hit save here, saving my blueprint, and now I can launch it. See if I can break something. Oh, it was a nice fun fact. You could see before I launch it what it was going to cost. Now it's gone, of course. All right, of course. Estimated cost will be $56 a month, based on the numbers I put in here. If it would run 24/7, that is, yeah. There's no. This is real simple. Just giving it a name. I could have done other prompt variables and I put configuration prompts here, but I didn't. Kept it simple. And so the blueprint is being launched. And again, this status can be all read through API, right? It's just a REST API call. Or the audit log, everything takes a few seconds before it enters a running state, compiles the actions it needs to do and the dependencies between it. You actually get the dependency map also here. Oh, that's funny. Oh, the single VM blueprints don't have a dependency map. Of course, that makes sense. Because it's only a single VM, there's no dependency. Takes a little while for sysprep to finish. Creating the VM. You see the payload being sent. It's creating the VM. You can see the task here. It's too busy with other things. And oh yeah, I gave it 90 seconds to wait for the guest OS. What time are we, gentlemen? Let me check. Okay, we have to move. So I hope you can accept my my VM, and I'll move on to the next section. But that's really how easy it is, right? Was it 5-6 clicks, and you have a complete single VM environment setup. Just going to scroll through this, right? So you can not only use it for orchestration VMs. We have the next release coming out, which does a whole bunch of things more like runbook automation. So you can really automate business processes as well. Check your low-hanging fruit. What is your top 10 tickets? What is your top 10 change tickets? And automate. And Calm is the perfect solution to do that. Right. Windows friendly is important for me. Quick run through to database orchestration era, and then I'll jump to Carbon, the containerized solution. One of the
take a quick break and see if there's any questions.
oh, sure.
Anyone raise hand or type in the Q&A if anyone has some questions. Doesn't seem like it.
That was a good break for me to take a sip of my drink. Yeah, we have 45 minutes left, I think.
Yeah,
ish 40-ish. Yeah. Plus we want some Q&A maybe. So I'll do a quick run through ERA.
Yeah.
ERA is very important if you have a large database estate and you have application developers in your landscape. What we see traditionally is
you need to switch screen, I think.
Oh yeah, here we go. It doesn't get old. And so ERA really gives you the power to put one API engine on top of your entire legacy database stack. Think about Oracle, MS SQL, cloning, creating new dev instances, maintaining versions, refreshing a database, creating a snapshot, all those daily repetitive operations that really belong to the dev lifecycle of a developer. Or that belong to larger organizations with larger data sets, of course. It doesn't have to be from developer origin. They have a lot of overhead in maintaining the database stack and a lot of human effort to do things that are automated in a public cloud. If you take a database service in Amazon, it is completely automated. There's nothing you need a DBA for. Well, maybe, but not for cloning and refreshes and those simple operations basically. But if you ask me, I wouldn't be able to create a snapshot on Oracle, really, or create an entire rock list for that matter. But if you take ERA, ERA is able to do this for me without me having to understand Oracle or MS SQL or all the other engines that we support for that matter. ERA is able to provision, patch, deploy, snapshot, restore, and what else more on that database structure. So it's really powerful if you have a larger estate of databases. ERA is founded by an ex-Oracle head in charge. I'm not sure what role he had, and he's a very visionary person where we see that the same world needs to be applied to databases where we do software-defined networking, where we do software-defined infrastructure. We're also working towards a world where databases is software-defined, but it doesn't make any sense if I say it like that. But you get what I'm going at, right? Where it's an API-driven world, let me use that word. And the developer can provision his stack with the ease of an API call. So yeah, we do that for a number of engines: Postgres, Oracle, MS SQL, MariaDB. We don't do Galera yet, but we do always-on clusters and RAK clusters and Postgres clustering. But we don't do Galera yet. That's on the roadmap. We'll be there soon. And yeah, really, it takes the master database as its master, and is allowing the user to provision new dev instances with a relationship to that master. So the whole time machine snapshot relationship is always in relation to the master. And you can provision a number of instances that have a relationship to a master, whether that's the Oracle version or the MS SQL version, the patching relationship, but also the database relationship. So you can revert back in time, roll forward in time, or refresh your database on every test cycle that you do in your Git commit. But not, yeah, like I said, right, if there's only one person in your chain, then your whole process velocity decreases, right? 40 builds a day versus one build in every 2 days. That's a big difference. So if there's one thing in your process that needs human interaction, you're done. Basically, your whole velocity goes down the drain. And in database world, in environments where databases have been around like storage, right? It's been in IT since ever day, so it has a lot of legacy, and those worlds tend to have also a lot of legacy provisioning processes, and that really slows down the velocity. In public cloud, this is gone, and with Era, you can do the same thing on your on-premise stack, but also in public clouds if you want, but on top of your legacy database engines. Because we run on Nutanix, there's also a lot of space savings, right? The challenge that we have, if we have 10 copies of a 2 terabyte production database, and those copies are exactly the same, except for the devs, the deltas that the developer put in there, which are totally not relevant. But then you're wasting a lot of space just to have 8 copies of the same data. So because we run on Nutanix and we do all this intelligent deduplication, space savings, and we own both the hypervisor and the storage, Era can do very intelligent things in regards to data copy management, RPO, RTO, because we intelligently map the data from one VM to the other without actually having to copy it on block level. We can just map the blocks to a different VM and therefore actually copy the data without it being really transferred. So not only space savings, but also copy management is a tremendous increase in Era landscape. How does it look like? Well, you see on the mid bar that there's Era, that's what it does. The orange items are on the roadmap. So we can do patching for Oracle, we can do patching for MS SQL, but not yet for Maria and Postgres and MySQL. And same with recovering your master database. So we can recover your child's, but it's not really a backup solution, or it's not yet a backup solution. So you can actually recover your master as well, because we have this cool system of managing data copy management. Our customers are asking us to provide a solution for their RPO on production databases, because it's very hard to provide a good objective time to recovery for larger databases when you have to deal with data copy management. If it takes a day, to copy the data over from, let's say, old school tapes to whatever VM you want to restore it on, then your recovery time is screwed. And because we do this intelligent, we can do it very fast. One-click provisioning. So yeah, MySQL, MariaDB, and Postgres, we provision the OS for you. We supply the OS, so you don't need to do anything. You can simply click, give me a new Era MySQL instance, and we will build one for you based on your specs. Era does that itself. It does it without COM or with the help of Prism, of course. But for the closed source engines like MS SQL and Oracle, you will need to provide a source instance, meaning Era will assimilate your instance, consume the VM, make a master copy of it, make an image out of it, and we'll use that image to mass deploy MS SQL or Oracle, for that matter, in whichever config you like. So the weird part about this, and I'm still not sure if this is true, but I should figure it out. If you let Era assimilate a standalone Oracle server, it is theoretically able to deploy a RUC server out of that discovered standalone server, as long as but it will be the same version, obviously. Not sure how we're doing that. We're doing the same thing on always on. You can assimilate the standalone and we can provision you an always on. It's kind of weird that we can do that, or cool actually. But that's really the granularity that you think of. So for those global operating systems, we have to assimilate the operating system first. Era will load up the version of the operating system and the version of the database engine, and is able to give you a new instance with that version, based on your customizations, of course. Yeah, the rest we already talked about, right? The database engines, catalog. It works based on SLAs. You can really also monitor the fact that the SLAs are being kept. Different SLAs are built in, but you can also add your own SLAs. And the time machine will oblige to the SLA, creating snapshots, so you have the right copy management. It can run in parallel to your normal backup software, so we don't archive logs or change anything on log segmentation on your database structure. So you can have Era being secondary or Era being primary in that respect. Yeah, I think Era is very cool because Era is a little bit more leaning in the API world. Let me quickly show you Era. I need to change my screen. Oh, my single VM worked, by the way. You can see it's running. The app is now in a running state. I can hand this over. I can do all kinds of customized installs, or really hand over the VM to my customer. I wanted to jump to Era quickly before we really run out of time for Carbon. I need that window for Carbon in 5 minutes. Right. Era is that wasn't okay. Oh. Era is a separate appliance VM, so it is a single VM that manages the entire state. Quick overview of what it can do. Overview. So this is my demo lab Era that's actually managing several amount of databases and the states. So one thing I wanted to show you, because what is really cool, let me add a database server. Can we register? Yeah. So I'm going to register, assimilate an existing MS SQL server. Now I know this one has my my Zenab demo. Those are the SQL boxes here, and I know these boxes are not in Era yet. This doesn't really matter because that's not what I wanted to show you. Oh, now it can't log in because I'm putting in a bogus password. Hold on. Yeah. So it's discovering the instance, it now knows. But instead of hitting register, what Era does is the API equivalent. And that's really cool if you want to automate things in Era. Very easy because you can choose your own language of poison, so to speak. For me, it's PowerShell. But if you're Python, then it's Python, right? Gives you the entire command you need to execute in order to do this. I'm not sure if they fixed this yet. Yeah, it looks like they fixed this. Was a small bug in that one. So I should be able to run this right here. But now I need to share this, I think. You see my screen? The copy paste didn't go well. Copy. No, it's not fixed yet. They made a typo. All right, there was a bug in that header. I'm sorry for that. Normally I hide it for my audience. Now I was too excited and I showed you anyway. I have to tell them to fix that. So in a nutshell, that's Era. You can really do enterprise database orchestration management, use the API to a great extent, give you lots of examples on how to do things, and really automate your database landscape with that. Moving back to my slide deck here. I won't talk about object storage for time respect. The object storage is hold on, is rather straightforward. I mean, it is used for S3 object storage, and that's really all there is to it. I mean, what's exciting about it? We have an S3 capable object storage that runs on Prism element level in our storage layer. It is a full S3 API capabilities. Just to give you the idea. 10.55.39.40. We'll go back here. So Carbon, what is Nutanix Carbon? Nutanix Carbon is our Kubernetes solution, and the Kubernetes solution is an open source implementation. So you're not locked into a Nutanix flavor Kubernetes. It is like all our other products, completely API controllable. It runs on a Prism Central level, so you can deploy multiple clusters to multiple Carbon clusters to multiple environments. What we do in Carbon is essentially the orchestration and deployment, take away the day zero, day one pain of deploying a Kubernetes infrastructure. Everybody wants to move to containers, but deploying and managing Kubernetes infrastructure is quite complex. So you need almost a specialist to maintain that. And you can, if you're really deep into this, then maybe Kubernetes is a better thing for you to choose. But if you want a really simple solution and not worry about too much customization, then Carbon is a really good solution for you. We provide the integration of storage drivers. Again, we own the entire stack, so it's very easy for us to integrate with write once, write many kind of storage drivers. It's cool because it's included in no extra cost. Carbon is included in our price. It is a full open source version of Kubernetes. And I think it's really cool because we now also have, it's just a 2.0 version, we're able to do the in-place upgrade of Kubernetes. So this version, this cluster is running Kubernetes 1.16.8. It has 3 HCI nodes, 2 master nodes, and 3 worker nodes. I deployed this as a production cluster, and I can choose the version when I deploy it. We can actually deploy one for the sake of the exercise. Let me deploy a development one. It will just build one node. Name of the cluster, test and logic. And it really is this simple, right? It asks you for the Nutanix cluster, it asks you for the Kubernetes version, and the host OS version. I only have one right now. What kind of resources do I want, and how would those resources look like? I'm just going to do next finish. Cluster username. Oh, this is my Nutanix cluster. Hold on. With that one. Where do I want to put the data? And what kind of data connection do I want for that cluster? And it will deploy the cluster. This will deploy the certificates, the chain, the queue config, the worker at C master nodes, install all the software on those nodes, build the relationship, build the network provider for you on top, and adds an ELK stack for reporting internally, so you can see the status of your pod, etc., etc. And there are many articles in our .next community. I'll show them also later. That apply to the capabilities of generating Kubernetes, I would say, where you can literally apply any generic WordPress article, or I had one lately from a colleague from mine where he built 2 Carbon clusters on 2 data centers, and he showed how Nutanix replication can fail over the entire Carbon cluster, including the workloads on the Kubernetes in that entire respect. So it's really cool. It's an open Kubernetes, and you can really use the Nutanix tools to even replicate this over dual data centers. It's not an active active solution because we don't have active active replication, and that will be very tricky in regards to data. But in regards to DR, it's very easy to configure that. Although we don't have a point-click DR solution yet, it is very easy to configure that with Nutanix replication in combination with Carbon config. So once you have your cluster running and you're running out of capacity, you can simply add more nodes. I can add a number of nodes and scale out my cluster automatically. I can have my XPlay monitor my worker nodes, and if the CPU usage exceeds, add more worker nodes, right? So dynamically scaling to an indefinite size. Obviously, if it's your own hardware, it's bound by the hardware limitations, but even then, we allow you to scale beyond your hardware limitations. So Carbon really is the solution for, I would say, a simple Kubernetes implementation. Why am I saying simple? Because if you're looking into complex network providers, more complex setup on regards to how the kernel OS works, on which you're on top of running Kubernetes, then you'll find that Carbon is limited. Because Carbon is running on Nutanix OS, we take away the entire need for managing the underlying OS. We take away the need for deploying the application, and we even take away the need for upgrading the application. So that also comes with a price, right? That means that we manage the OS and we manage patches and security for OS. That also means if you want a very specific kernel-based security driver in your kernel OS of your Kubernetes host, then yeah, you'll be limited with what Nutanix can do for you. So yeah, here's the roadmap. We're actually running at 2.1 right now, so that's where we are. And we're pretty on track. So usually we're 60 days behind on the Kubernetes release. So right now it's 16.8. I think what's the latest Kubernetes release right now? 1.18 maybe? I don't know. I'd lost track. And so we're usually 60 days behind that release. But what you get with Carbon is a full open source Kubernetes, completely installed and managed by Nutanix software. Of course, it's your stack to manage. But if there's a problem, you can call Nutanix support, and we will resolve the Kubernetes problems for you, because it's included in our product. So yeah, it really takes away the ease or the need to manage or have a skilled DevOps role that is purely managing your Kubernetes stack if you're not that heavily Kubernetes yet. Some Kubernetes links. I would say read .next.nutanix.com. Oh, I saw a question for the database. Sorry, I'm just seeing it now. I'll revisit it once I finish on this one. So I recommend visiting next.nutanix.com. There's lots of blog articles there on Carbon and how to use Kubernetes with Carbon, and what are the tutorials of using it with our setup. Usually they're just very straightforward: download Q, config, do your normal Kubernetes things, but also there's a few articles that allow you to do cool interactions with the Nutanix stacks as well. So so not only storage drivers for our storage platform, but we also provide NFS drivers for RaidMany. Again, this is completely integrated into Nutanix. So you simply have a provider in Kubernetes, and everything you talk to Kubernetes will talk to Nutanix automatically. So if you ask the Nutanix storage provider to add a new volume, Nutanix will add a new volume for you. If you do this on a custom setup, it will take you a few weeks before that whole chain of interaction works well. All right. Yeah, I would really recommend starting with Carbon if you're not into Kubernetes, if you're seeing a hurdle in managing, in deploying it, or upgrading it for that matter. I think the real cool power of this is that you can do the one-click upgrades with Kubernetes and basically have the whole burden of managing the application itself put away in an autonomous suite that is managed by a vendor, free of extra charge. Let me say it like that. I see a question: would you recommend using this for a small startup? We're running two different databases, a backend and a front end. I'm assuming this is in regards to the Era suite. And yeah, if you have two master databases, it really depends on how many slaves do you have, right? It is oriented into the amount of production instances or copies that you really have, or how heavy your developers are waiting for a human in the process chain. So if your developers are waiting daily for a DBA to do a manual operation that you can automate, yeah, then it's automatically repaying itself, right? If you have a database refresh once a month and you have two database instances, you'll probably not be able to create your business case for Era, because yeah, there's of course a license cost, and it has to outweigh the resource drop and space gain and performance gain of your business processes in order to outweigh the cost of the license, of course, which it will usually do when you start to scale at a number of child databases. But again, it really depends on what kind of business you run, and how much waiting time is involved for your developers or for whatever business process in order for the database operations to be executed manually. All right. Looking at the time, I have 11 minutes left. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
I'll leave the floor open for questions.
Yeah, I have a question, Michelle.
Yeah.
If you want to get started, obviously you have a different ways of starting to automate in a Nutanix platform and also automate across different clouds. You can use PowerShell if that's kind of where you come from, but you can use any language to automate Nutanix, and also in CORM you can use different code types in CORM embedded. Is that right?
Yeah, like I said, right? There's easy ways, different ways of learning it. If you're Linux, so we have the anti-CLI tools and the ACLI tools. So it's a CLI tool that we can talk against. If you're Python, then REST API, of course. If you're PowerShell and you're a beginner, we have the seam-dlets. If you want to start with seam-dlets, a little bit of ease of commands of automating. And then, of course, automating the workload deployments. The easiest way to start is with the simple VM blueprint, as I showed, and start deploying your first VM, my first VM, hello world kind of thing. Yeah.
So basically, there's three ways of getting started with automation. It is scripting directly. There's CORM, and then also XPlay. And XPlay is a little bit like if this then that.
Yeah.
For Nutanix, right?
Yeah. I jumped over that a little bit quickly, but yes, maybe I can show that a little bit more. Yeah. There's an entire action gallery in XPlay that you can choose from operation, and really allows you to drag and drop actions. If this, do that. I think in this release, the action is also can be schedules. Action playbooks. The trigger can be different, so not only an alert, but also a manual. I'm pretty sure there should be a schedule also, but oh, of course, this is an older version of Prism. The schedule functionality has also been added, so it can be different triggers to fire off such an if-then-else solution. Yes. Yeah.
So you could make a disaster recovery failure or initiate that from in there.
Yeah, exactly. It depends on what you want to automate. Usually, disaster recovery scenarios, it's not something you want to automate. Or test very, very, very carefully, and then automate it, of course. But yes, that's really what it can do. It can respond to operating system alerts, like we saw with the IIS VM, right? So web server exceeding CPU usage, you take action remediating that issue by automating whatever needs to be done. And whether that's recovering from a DR scenario, or adding another web server to the farm, or deploying another pod, or adding more workers to your carbon solution, right? It can be any of those things.
Yeah. So XPlay is basically the easy way into it for non-scripting guys.
Yeah, non-coding skills required.
Yeah.
You can point click. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. From your perspective, to get started, what is the most efficient? Where's the quick wins gains?
Chrome debugger, really. Don't start anywhere else. Start REST API. And if you're a little bit of a scripter, right? If you're a little bit of a scripter, start REST API and start using the Chrome debugger. If you really want to explore, you're a beginner in scripting, CLI tools. There's the REST API Explorer that helps you discover how a certain call works. So you can really do a little bit of a trial and error here. Be careful, because it does actually execute on your platform. But you can really, at least the get calls, etc. It can be very easily. Now it's asking me to. This should be a straightforward call. Kind subnet. This will simply work. Need to put out the and then I can post it, try it out, and it will respond with a 422. Oh. Oh, 0 is less than a minimum of 1. Length, yeah, I need 99 results. It's my search filter. Try it out, and there's my subnet list. Here's my response. It's very easy to give it a try and to see how that works without you actually having to go into code. It's sort of like a built-in postman to explore what we can do. Yeah. Different API versions you can select from. In this case, it's only version 3 available for Prism Central. But all the elements that you can think of, these are the endpoints that you can control, and you really start thinking about how you would automate things. But again, like I said, if you've done a little bit of automation, then the process is the most key. So okay, I'm creating a project, so I start with project create. But then before I create a project, it queried a bunch of things that doesn't show when I'm going to read the project create stuff here, or read a manual that says project create. It needs image UUIDs, it needs network UUIDs. So I really think using the Chrome debugger, I'm just gonna hammer it again, is much more easier to also find what process is involved, see the steps that are coming by here in order to get the information that you need, because you need multiple UUIDs. So yeah, for the advanced person, Chrome debugger, don't read any documentation, just use Chrome debugger. For the beginner, use REST API Explorer, PowerShell tools, NCLI, ACLI. But if you start coding, really, whatever language you code in, take the REST API approach, because that gives you full power in the end. You may start small, but you never know how things go. I started with something small when I joined Nutanix 3 months ago. When I joined Nutanix when I was 3 months in, I created a small thing, and that blew up to an app that is now used by the world community. And now that small thing is a big monster that still has my old CMDLAT based code in there to create a VM, right? Because I once started with the CMDLATs because I thought that was handy. Eventually, I saw that whatever I wanted to do, I could always do in REST API, and therefore REST API is the only true answer to the universal way of automating anything in Nutanix. And that's really where I got my passion from, because that's also very powerful. I hope I was able to spread that passion today and give you a little bit of a laugh and a little bit of an insight on how things work. If you have any questions, I'll share the GitHub repo right away. Share it in the chat. So this is me, MS23. Which service would you recommend starting with a startup, developing a social collaboration platform with 4 people and limited funding? Which service? What do we mean with that? Can someone elaborate?
I think we can pick up on that one later.
Sure.
Connect and
yeah. Sure. But this is the base repo. This is all Nutanix with the exception of TV head and thingy here, but this is all Nutanix PowerShell. One-click demo is a huge repository. It has basically all the functions in there. One-click robo is a new one I've been working on. It's basically even more advanced. All PowerShell, but yeah, if you like it. So one-click demo, and then the modules here that basically contain all the modules of Nutanix, a little bit sorted: COM, ERA, files, Carbon, Move, Objects, Prism, X-ray, all the modules, functions that belong to that product. If you take COM, for example, there's lots of functions, update the default project, all kinds of things that you can do. JSON-based, object-based, different evolution of time in how things can be manipulated. But literally anything you want to do in Nutanix can be found there. Yeah. Which of the products? Okay. Yeah. So.
I think the question is.
I would start with a cloud bundle, really.
Yeah.
That's a combo bundle where you get files and I think COM as well. I'm not sure, or if COM is a reasonable cheap add-on to the cloud bundle. Yeah, it doesn't give you ERA, but really ERA really for the enterprise large-scale databases. If you're designing something from ground up, you would use a MongoDB or a JSON object-oriented database anyway, I would think. If you're still stuck to legacy technology and you have database copy management to do, then yes, Era is a valuable product, but it is quite in the price if you only have a few instances of databases, right? So,
when Helge, I will reach out and
yeah, sure.
on your question. So
yeah.
I can give you an overview. Thank you for the question. We'll pick up on it. I'll reach out to you. So I think we're running out of time, Michelle. I think you have, I understand now, you have why you have 6 monitors at your workplace. There's a lot of stuff going on. Getting it across in one monitor is a challenge indeed, but you managed. Thank you for that. I think for us, the attendees, I think we got the impression that what can be done. Even I didn't get all the details into what you did, but definitely an impression of what can be done in Nutanix with regards to automation. So I think for everyone who attended, reach out if you want to dive deeper into something. We'll share the link for Michelle's GitHub library and also some additional information. And reach out if you want to discuss one-to-one with Michelle or someone else on specific projects, then we can follow on that. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Michelle, very much for taking the time and taking us through this. And hope to see you on next week, where we look into cost control on different clouds. Actually, very interesting tool to do that. So thank you, Michelle, and thank you.
You're welcome, everyone.